What's up, everybody? Welcome back to The Progenitor. This is the show where we go over a director's entire filmography, talking about themes, shots, pacing, and give a brief review, all within 30 minutes. So let's get started. I'm going to start with spoiler alert. Now, back to the show. Ridley Scott tries something new in the present day, and this time he tries his hand at a serial killer procedural. And another first, this is the first film where he picks up where a film series left off. He picks up with the sequel. He didn't even direct the first film. Can you guess what this one is called? Who cares? I already mentioned it last week. Hannibal. It is a continuation of the film series that began with, I guess you could say, Manhunter, Silence of the Lambs, directed by Jonathan Demme, Manhunter, directed by Michael Mann, one of the greats as well. But one of the main challenges Ridley Scott faced with this film was he lost the main writer for Silence of the Lambs with Ted Talley, and he also lost Jodie Foster, who played Starling, who was the main character of Silence of the Lambs. So you have to recast the main character, okay? And one of the reasons Jodie Foster primarily left was because she thought there were negative attributes that betrayed the original character that can be found in Hannibal. And Ted Talley, he was sort of like, wow, this book, Hannibal, it's crazier than Silence of the Lambs. So I'm not going to work on this one. So pretty much he had to find a new writer, and then he had to find a new actor to play the main character. And we're not talking Batman here, folks. We're not talking about Bruce Wayne Batman where you can put on a mask and you just had to be debonair. This is a FBI profiler. So the main thing you got going for is, I guess, a southern accent. But we'll get into it, folks. Now, I will say this is not one of my favorite films. This is on the bottom of the list, close to. But upon second and third viewing, it has improved dramatically. And we're going to get into the cast and crew right now, but we'll talk more about the film going forward and, of course, themes and shots. So let's get into it. The film, this was directed by, who? Ridley Scott, of course. It was produced by Dino De Laurentiis. Now, this guy has been around for a long time and has done a bunch of different movies. Manhunter by Michael Mann, Army of Darkness by Sam Raimi, Bound with the Wachowskis, Serpico with Lumet, Dune with Lynch, and the new one, he bought those rights. So there it is. Martha De Laurentiis, she was the producer for the TV series Hannibal, Red Dragon, Hannibal, a movie called Breakdown, and Ridley Scott returns with his Scott-Free Productions. So he's also producing. Actually, he's produced every film from here on out and earlier as well. Just not Gladiator. I think he was a uncredited co-executive producer. So I have to double check that. Anyways, the screenplay was written by David Mamet and Steve Zaillian. If you don't know Mamet, he wrote Untouchables, Glengarry Glen Ross, Wag the Dog. He wrote Ronin. Really great films. Wag the Dog has this really, really great, dark sense of humor. Ronin is a great action thriller. The Untouchables, what can I say? Steven Zaillian. So I wrote Mission Impossible, but I thought that was David Cope. Oh, you know what? Steven Zaillian wrote the original story with David Cope. I don't know how to say his name. But he's primarily known for Schindler's List. So I heard that was a great movie. I watched it as a kid. Got to rewatch it. Don't really remember it. But yeah, I know it's a great movie. It's Steven Spielberg as well. So there you go. The story was based on a novel by Thomas Harris, who wrote all the Lecter books. Music was by Hans Zimmer, of course, with a new style because, Hans Zimmer has been going bombast with Gladiator. This one, he pares it down just a little bit. And cinematography, again, by John Matheson. And this film was edited by Pietro Scalia. Now, this movie, he didn't work with the same Arthur Max production designer. This film was with Norris Spencer. Norris Spencer also a production design for Thelma and Louise and The Black Rain. Or not The Black Rain, but Black Rain. So there you go. A little bit of the collaboration going forward with that. For example, you got Matheson back, you got Pietro Scalia, you got Hans Zimmer, you got that guy I was just talking about with the production design, Norris Spencer, and then you also have Zeljko Ivanek. This is the first film he works with Zeljko Ivanek, who plays the doctor Verger. Sorry, Verger. So his name is Cordell Donling in the film. Zeljko Ivanek. Man, the more I say it, it's got such a awesome ring to it. Now on to the cast. Okay, here we go. Anthony Hopkins, of course. Come on, folks. Silence of the Lambs, Bram Stoker's Dracula. He plays the Van Helsing of that movie. Van Helsing, might I remind you, was also played by Hugh Jackman. So, I don't know. Who would you go for? Anthony Hopkins? Hugh Jackman? They're both pretty sexy? Actually, I don't know. Moving forward, Julianne Moore. Now, one of those temple actresses. She definitely was in a bunch of Paul Thomas Anderson films at the beginning with Boogie Nights, Magnolia. She was in The Big Lebowski, Children of Men. Great movie right there. Then you have Gary Oldman. Gary Oldman is back with Anthony Hopkins because they were both in Bram Stoker's Dracula. And you know what? That's funny because Gary Oldman was Dracula. Anthony Hopkins was the vampire hunter, Van Helsing. And guess what? Anthony Hopkins finally gets his revenge. Gary Oldman was also in JFK, Fifth Element, Dark Knight Trilogy as Commissioner Jim Gordon. And one of the things is I remember they mentioned that Gary Oldman did not want to be put in the cast list because he didn't want anyone to know that he was in the film, pretty much. He wanted people to be surprised and have to guess. He didn't want people to guess, like, oh, where's Gary Oldman? I wonder when he's going to pop up. But he wanted to surprise people. I think that's what they said. Ray Liotta is also in this movie. Goodfellas, Narc, Identity. He plays a really big dick in this film, like a dick, not a nice guy, a dick. Frankie R. Faison, who's in Maximum Overdrive, Do the Right Thing, and a bunch of Hannibal movies. He plays the same character, Barney, who's kind of like one of those. He works in the asylum, but he's not a doctor. He's like an orderly. Yeah, he's like an orderly. And Giancarlo Giannine, who was on Man on Fire, one of my favorite Tony Scott films. He was in Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace as, dang man, what's that character's name? He dies in Quantum of Solace. Spoiler alert. I'm so sorry for bringing that up, but it's not Felix Leiter because Felix Leiter is played by Jeffrey Wright. But I am looking this up. Renee Mathis. Oh, Renee. What a sad ending for that character. But anyways, we gotta move on. Wife's Corner. Actually, she did not watch this with me, which is the first. So what happened was she saw Gary Oldman's character's face, Mason Verger, and she checked out. Because if you guys have seen this movie, I want to explain something real quick. Mason Verger, however you say it. In the film, basically, he used to be this rich guy, and he's also a child molester. And he's assigned to go to Hannibal Lecter as a psychologist once he's caught for the molestation, and they're trying to keep him out of prison kind of thing or something like that. So they get really friendly, and everyone knows Hannibal is very much a manipulator. He gets Verger on drugs and then tells Verger to cut his face off. Now, this isn't like Face Off, John Woo's amazing Face Off. This is crazy guy talking with the crazy guy, and the crazy guy tells the crazy guy to cut his face off with a piece of glass from a broken mirror that Hannibal just broke. So Verger cuts his face off, and throughout the rest of the film, you see a husk of a face. No lips, no nose. You could tell this guy did a lot of good work on his own face. So basically, my wife saw that and was like, I'm out. I don't need to watch this movie. And I completely understand it. This film is dark and it's bloody. And that's one of my main qualms with this movie. One of my main qualms is that in Silence of the Lambs, they do a lot of show, but they also take a lot of that show out and make you think about it, which I find is more frightening when you're thinking about the overt violence that's happening. Whereas in this film, they're really throwing in your face. They're throwing blood, they're spilling guts. You see everything, and that is one of the great things about Ridley Scott. He's a purely visual filmmaker. So it's great when you see all these things, when you get to experience them firsthand with your eyes. But not when it's all this homicidal tendencies, blood and guts spilling everywhere. It's not the way that any of his war and sword and sandal films are like. Although I will say Black Hawk Down is sort of like that, but there's a little more artistry to Black Hawk Down, and you realize it's different because Black Hawk Down is a bunch of soldiers sacrificing their lives to save each other and save their fellow brothers, right? So there's an altruistic point of view there, whereas this movie is violence towards crazy people, violence towards innocent people. So there is a bit of difference because one is a war film, one is a thriller slasher film. But I will say this is one of the best looking slasher films out there. So we'll end with that. Let's get into the themes, folks, because we got some shots. We got some really cool shots, actually. So, empowered female character. Ding, ding, ding. Starling is a strong female protagonist, police officer, FBI agent. Sorry, not even police officer. She's an FBI agent profiler. And the sad thing is she's always belittled by her male compatriots, but she is the most effective out of them. And I believe that the belittling is because of low self-esteem of these guys, because they see someone of the opposite gender who can do things better than they can. And she's also the most effective at tracking Hannibal Lecter, except for Giannine. How do you say his name? Sorry, I want to say it. Giancarlo Giannine. So let's move on from there. Nature, space is a hostile and uncontrollable environment. Ding, ding, ding. Everywhere Starling goes, she is in danger because, Hannibal can hide and move around at will. This is especially during Italy, where she would be a fish out of water, and she doesn't have any time there, pretty much. And at the same time, even for Giancarlo Giannini, Hannibal is still able to maneuver around him. Giancarlo plays this character named Pazzi. Pazzi, okay. So it's always a uncontrollable environment because Hannibal is really good at melding in with shadows. And after a while, you can tell he understands every single place he goes. So it seems like he's investigating everything. So he knows the nooks and crannies, and he knows his routine. So everywhere he goes, he knows the ins and outs. So he's able to control those to make it hostile and uncontrollable to everybody else, which I think is a really awesome thing about him. And even in America, America's so big, it's I wouldn't say overpopulated, but there's a huge population in America, in Maryland, and he's able to hide in plain sight. So Hannibal is a cannibal killer who will go around and hide and then attack you when you least expect it, because everywhere around you is a hostile and uncontrollable environment. Next up, the only way to survive is adapt. Ding, ding, ding. Well, in this case, this is kind of more of the opposite, but Patsy should have adapted quicker. The problem is he should have realized that Hannibal had the squeeze on him. And he should have realized it once Patsy hired a pickpocket. So what's happening is Patsy discovers that Hannibal is Hannibal, although he's masquerading as a museum curator, pretty much, or historian. And so now he finds out that this is a guy, and he also goes on the FBI most wanted list and finds out he's most wanted. And then he finally realizes there's an additional not ransom, but what do you call those? Like they used to have the signs on the wall, most wanted list or whatnot, and then they'll give you a cash prize, right? And he discovers Verger's giving a cash prize, but he wants a fingerprint to prove that it's Hannibal. So what happens is Patsy hires this pickpocket to get Hannibal's prints, and pretty much the pickpocket follows Hannibal and finally goes in to get the print because he buys this little sterling silver bracelet. And Hannibal touches the bracelet but stabs the pickpocket. And right off the bat, right there, I would have been like, oh shoot, he's on to me. I'm not going to fuck around with this, right? Patsy should have done that, but he doesn't. So he's dead. If it was me, I would have been like, fuck this guy. This guy's good. I'm going to bring Starling in. That would have been my way of adapting because Starling understands Hannibal and knows how manipulative Hannibal can be. Even though she tries to warn Patsy, he doesn't listen. So, again, he should have adapted. Anyways, age does not mean a thing. Ding ding ding. Starling is probably the youngest out of everyone in this cast. She knows all the risks and she tries to warn Patsy, who doesn't listen, and she survives. You know, she's the survivor in this film, and she doesn't lose a hand or nothing. She doesn't lose nothing, folks. Anything. But do not trust rich people. Ding ding ding. So one of the main things is Verger, played by Gary Oldman, is a rich dude, and he wants retribution for Hannibal, forcing him to take his face off. So that's why he's putting out, I don't know, is it called a ransom money? No, it's just a reward money. And he's giving a reward to anyone that can catch Hannibal. And yeah, so throughout the film, Hannibal, goes after Hannibal is pretty much minding his own business, realizes Patsy is after him, finds out that Patsy was hired by Verger, decides he's going to go back to kill Verger. So there you go. You shouldn't trust rich people because they're going to bring you into this whole mess of their life, and then you're going to get killed by a cannibal serial killer, and then you're not even going to be able to spend the money you thought you were going to get. And at the end of the film, Verger still dies, and he gets eaten by the very pigs that he hired the Italian people to raise pigs that are man-eating pigs, and he was hoping to feed Hannibal to those pigs, but instead he gets fed to the pigs. And another thing is, rich people seem to be very disrespectful to the help. So he's yelling at his doctor, and the doctor's just like, oh, fuck this. And he pretty much throws Verger down to the pig pen, and the pigs eat him. So there you go. Next up, violence don't solve a thing. Brains do. Ding, ding, ding. Well, brains definitely get served in this film. Krendler betrays Starling for money. Hannibal takes him hostage, opens his head, and feeds himself and Krendler his own brains. So, hold on, sorry. Hannibal takes Krendler hostage, opens Krendler's head, and feeds Krendler his own brains, as well as eating Krendler's brains himself. Whereas Starling is watching and actually ends up cuffing Hannibal to herself, and Hannibal has to decide whose hand to cut off at the end of the film. So that's what I mean by brains, right? Starling does not attack Hannibal per se. She tries, but she realizes she can't do that because she's still drugged. Hannibal drugs her at one point in the film. So what she does is she gets close to him and she cuffs him without him realizing it and traps him. And so there wasn't any violence to that. She used her brains, she sacrificed herself, or so she thought she was sacrificing herself. But she also knew Hannibal has this weird sort of mutual respect for Starling. So at the end of the day, she got out of the Vinici situation because she trusted that Hannibal would not kill her. So there you go. Happy wife, happy life. Ding ding ding. Well, this is kind of an opposite because throughout the film, Patsy, who I mentioned before, he's married to a younger lady, and he constantly wants to make her happy. And that's one of the major reasons he ended up going after Lecter to get the reward money because he realizes he's not making enough money to give her everything she wants, right? So he risks his life to make her happy and he ends up dying. So maybe she's happier he's dead so she can find someone younger and richer. That was kind of my thought, right? So I don't know. That one's harder to say. I thought that was more of the opposite of happy wife, happy life. But at the same time, if you think about it, it does make sense. Now she can find someone younger and maybe richer. Moving forward, distrust of authority. Ding ding ding. Throughout the film, there's a bunch of bureaucracy between the FBI, the police, and international police. And Starling, she works better away from the politics, so she gets away from all that, so she can get her work done. Whereas you have Krenler, played by Ray Liotta, who's a big dick. He plays the politics game. He also wants more money, so he tries to get in with Verger. And guess what? He gets to eat his own brains, and he dies. Right? Patsy almost succeeds. He's just not as smart and cruel as Hannibal. So there you go. Money is coveted. Ding ding ding. Throughout this film, we've talked about how Patsy and Krenler all want money from Verger, and guess what? All three of them die. So it's not worth it, guys. All right, Battle of the Sexes. Ding ding ding. Starling versus Hannibal. This is what it comes down to. Who cares about Patsy or any of the other characters? It's really just about Starling and her relationship with Hannibal. And that's what makes the franchise interesting whenever Hannibal finds someone they respect. So Hannibal at first in, say, Manhunter, he respects the character, the main cop in that, or the main FBI profiler in that. So he doesn't kill him per se. He respects Starling at the end of Silence of the Lambs, and he respects her after this film. If you take out Starling, you lose a certain sort of empathy towards Hannibal. Also, there are many times throughout this film where men who outrank Starling do some incredibly stupid shit and they fuck up. Whereas whenever Starling leads, things go okay. For example, the ambush at the beginning of the film, it's a drug raid, right? Everything was going well until one of the male police officers decides not to listen to Starling and he gets a bunch of people killed. So there you go. Do not trust robots, androids. Well, I was thinking, Hannibal is kind of like a human android, no emotions and evil. So don't trust them. So there you go. The afterlife, death, God. Ding ding ding. There's a moment where Hannibal discusses with Patsy about heritage and legacy. Supposedly, Patsy's ancestor tried to kill someone in the Medici family and was put to death by hanging. Not sure about the disembowelment of it all, but at the end of the day, Patsy dies the same sort of death, and it relates closely to his ancestor's death. And this is more of a idea of cyclical death and sort of Hannibal's looking back at the past because Hannibal is very wise, he knows a lot of history. So he's kind of like, hey man, history comes back to repeat itself if you don't learn from it. And if you try to kill someone or you try to capture someone, you're going to end up like your ancestors. So, boom, there you go. Afterlife, death, definitely death returns. Okay, so let's go to some shots. Again, I got a bunch of shots here. We're going to try to go through them really quick. I'm just going to jump like 20 minutes, 48 seconds. This is a Tony Scott like oversaturation of light and dark and speed ramping as Verger. This is the scene where Verger is cutting his face off. So you can turn to 20 minutes and 48 seconds to watch him cut his face off. And then at 20 minutes 54 seconds, you see a piece of his face fall to the floor. Oh, this is exciting. At 25 minutes and 42 seconds, you see a ceiling fan. Oh, not a ceiling fan. But it is one of those fans. What happens is Starling breaks into Barney's apartment. Barney is an orderly that used to take care of Hannibal, and now he's selling Hannibal paraphernalia to get extra money on the side. And she breaks into his house to interrogate him, and he's got a fan going. Now, if you don't remember, throughout White Squall, Black Rain, and I believe Someone to Watch Over Me, there's always these crazy large ceiling fans. So that's just kind of like a motif throughout the film. All right, what else we got? Beautiful lighting of Florence exterior, 1 hour, 10 minutes, and 15 seconds. Just, I thought it was beautiful. At an hour, 14 minutes, and 44 seconds, Lecter shows Patsy the art of his ancestor hanging. And then this is the whole sequence. So starting at an hour, 14 minutes, and 44 seconds, you realize Lecter knows what Patsy is trying to do. He captures Patsy, and then he hangs Patsy. But right before he hangs Patsy, he cuts open Patsy's stomach with a razor, drops him from the museum balcony. Patsy falls, and at an hour, 19 minutes, and 15 seconds, his bowels spill out. So he was disemboweled. That, an hour, 50 minutes, and 16 seconds, this is where Verger gets eaten alive by the boars. At an hour, 58 minutes, and 57 seconds, so Lecter scalps Krendler's head, and you see his brain, which is a really cool shot. So an hour, 58 minutes, 57 seconds. And at an hour, 59 minutes, and 38 seconds, Lecter cuts the film of the brain off. There's a little film over the brain, and sautés a piece of Krendler's brain. That was awesome. And then at 2 hours, 6 minutes, and 59 seconds, Lecter, who has his arm tied up because he cuts his hand off, he feeds a piece of brain to an Asian kid on an airplane because he escapes. So basically, Lecter's trying to make the Asian kid be smarter than he would be just eating fish. So he's got a kind heart, folks. Don't look at him as a complete animal, although he is. So, anyways, guys, thank you for joining me in watching Hannibal. Like I said, it is not my favorite Ridley Scott film. It is also not my favorite of the Hannibal films. I would say Manhunter and Silence of the Lambs. Those are my top. But I will say it is worth a visit, even though it's super bloody. So be careful who you watch it with. Next up, though, we have one of my all-time favorites, Black Hawk Down. Now, unfortunately, you do have to rent it or buy it. I would think that it's $3.99 on iTunes, or just get the Blu-ray. Guys, Ridley Scott does commentary on all of his films. Get the Blu-ray, watch the film, then listen to the commentary, because he always has something interesting to say about every single one of his films, and he is a natural storyteller. A lot of people say Ridley Scott is not great with stories. He is, folks. He's just more visual than most people, and you have to look in between the lines of the visuals to get the meaning. So always, I always give every director a shot, and Ridley Scott is a true legend. Give his films a shot. Anyways, I'll talk to you guys next week. Black Hawk Down. Peace out.